What about shining a spotlight on the source? I know that Governor Bush is a big fan of the disaggregated data. Have you gotten to a point where you can actually go back and see where these bad teachers are coming from in terms of what colleges of education are producing them? Because I know that you and I have talked before about the fact that maybe we need to look at the curriculum that the colleges of education are teaching that produce these teachers.
Eric, there is actually another part of the bill that requires the Department of Education to do just that, to look at, we have, I want to say that there are 28 approved colleges of education in the state, from our community colleges to the private colleges to the public institutions, and part of the bill requires the Department of Education to take a look at the effectiveness of the graduates of those colleges of education. Once you look at it, you may be very surprised that, the school that is producing the best qualified teachers, the graduates whose students learn the most, and it may be a little bitty college that we haven't paid much attention to, that maybe then we can make policy decisions to replicate what they're doing in the other colleges of education, or, let's just fund that college more to produce more graduates. And maybe in an institution that is producing teachers that our school districts really don't want to hire, maybe they shouldn't, maybe they need to improve or put their resources into a different program.
How dare you apply common sense to such a thing as teaching our children?
It's amazing, isn't it?
Pat, can you stick around a couple more minutes?
Sure.
Pat Levesque is with us. She is the executive director. Foundation for Florida's Future is the organization. We've got a few more topics we want to get on with her and use her considerable insight and background into the world of education. That's next on 100.7 FM WFLA.
Trustworthy. Now back to the WFLA studios for the morning show with Preston Scott on Tallahassee's WFLA.
Pat Levesque is executive director for Foundation for Florida's Future, and we're talking about education here on the morning show. Pat, thanks so much for hanging out with us a little bit longer. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Got an email yesterday from someone that suggests that there is a movement afoot, there's a Senate bill out there that would begin the dismantling of the Florida virtual school. Now, I know that that former Governor Bush and Education Secretary Frank Brogan, I believe, very involved in trying to get that thing off the ground. I know 10 years ago my own son got involved in it, and we had great results from it. And it's supposed to expand in a sense to every district this fall. What can you tell us about this effort to kind of undermine it by making it only for core classes?
Well, Preston, I think it's a terrible policy. The foundation advocates for educational alternatives for every child. Every child learns differently, and we need to have an education system that provides options to meet each child's learning style. And the Florida Virtual School has been a fantastic program. It's nationally recognized. I think it is the largest virtual school program in the country. And it's doing a fantastic job serving public school students, private school students, home education students. I have to recommend a particular book called Disrupting Class. It's a book by a Harvard professor who talks about how technology can transform our public education system. And in that book, and some of the policies the foundation would advocate is actually going in the opposite direction of where the legislature is going. And that would be, we need to have more Florida virtual type schools available for our public school districts to tap into, and not just full schools. We have content now that is free online where teachers could utilize this coursework to make our public school classrooms richer. And, I'll give you an example. If we have a student in Sopchoppy who watches the television show Crime Scene Investigation, CSI, and he knows that he wants to become a forensic scientist in the future, well, we may not have the ability to offer forensic science classes for one student in Wakulla County. We may not even have the ability to offer those courses through our Florida Virtual School. But I guarantee you there's probably a college professor in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, that could teach one virtual class to students from all across the country. And why shouldn't we have a system set up that would allow our Wakulla County students to take that forensic science class online, and it would probably cost us less than we pay per course here in our public school system. We need to look at technology in a completely different way. And the current position of the Senate on limiting Florida Virtual to only core courses goes in the exact opposite direction of where we need to head.
Real quickly, Pat, so that our listeners, because I think we have a lot of people that are very much in favor of the expansion of the virtual school, where's the pushback coming from? Is it coming from the union? Is it coming from the fear of the threat of the virtual school and what it would do to reduce the need for the class size amendment?
No, I really think it's a budget issue. I really think that folks are trying to get a handle on costs, and one way they see in doing that is just limiting the types of courses the state would reimburse through Florida Virtual. I really think that's it.
So then one of your challenges, then, I would imagine, has to be to communicate that it's actually, much as the higher education system is trying to do, that it's in the state's economic best interest down the road to offer kind of a very diverse palette of academic course offerings. Is that an argument your foundation is currently trying to make?
Yes, and in fact, if you look in the House, I think the House of Representatives is heading more in the direction that we're advocating. There's some language in a budget bill that would put forth a virtual curriculum marketplace, and it would require the Department of Education to look at setting up a common platform system so that content providers from all across the country or the world could put their content on so our school districts could tap into it, their own choice on how much they want to use it, but create the platform that brings more of that directly into our public schools.
And then since Preston mentioned it, it seems like every time we have you on, we have to talk about the class size amendment.
Sure.
Does your foundation support having this thing on the ballot and letting the voters maybe rethink their earlier decision on this? And then how much does the possibility of having Kendrick Meek on the ballot in 2010 as well, running for Senate, the guy who authored the bill at the state, how much does that impact the political calculus, so to speak, when you're trying to decide what the best way to handle it is?
Right. Well, our foundation board hasn't officially taken a position on the class size joint resolution, and we probably won't, just because you have to use your political capital. You have to be selective in how you use that, and there are a lot of other supporters for the class size amendment, so we're the ones pushing for higher math and science standards and teacher quality in our schools. I would say that the resolution seems to have a lot of legislative support. I'm sure that they've done their homework and have looked at whether or not the voters would pass this by a 60% threshold. I applaud their efforts for moving that resolution through the process.
I have to believe the former governor, though, is maybe just sort of sitting back and saying a quiet "I told you so" when you look at the money that's been spent on that behemoth, Pat, and what that money could do for just the overall education budget right now.
Well, I don't know that he's...
I hear a smile in your voice. I hear the smile, Pat.
I think if anything, speaking for Governor Bush, he would just wish that all those billions of dollars that were put into the class size amendment could have gone into paying our teachers more and paying them in market-based ways. And that's really the shameful loss of the last couple of years on how we could have used that money.
Last time you were on the show, or one of the last times you were on the show, very quickly, you talked about your foundation's efforts to find new ways to communicate with the teachers themselves as a way of maybe going around the union. You found that unions were very restricting in terms of what information they allowed to get to the teachers. A couple years later, how would you say you guys are doing on that front?
I would say we still have a long way to go. We are reaching out to more and more teachers. We put out actually a DVD, we could send it to you all, that would allow teachers in an easy way to explain the FCAT and how we grade our schools and how those grades are used. And we did just distribute that last year to teachers, and we're still trying to follow up on the impacts of how those DVDs were used. I think that every year you have to reevaluate how you operate, and we're probably looking more towards focusing our efforts towards making sure the policies that are done here at the state level continue to move our kids forward and our public schools forward.
Pat, as always, we appreciate your time. Thanks so very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, guys.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Pat Levesque, she is the Executive Director, Foundation for Florida's Future, otherwise known as Jeb Bush's initiative on continuing to influence education in our state for the better.